All right, we are live. This is Dr. Megan. Joe just disappeared because his dog is wanting to participate in our podcast. And we have Hannah and Jenna Lee on as members of the Do Better Collective. So welcome everyone to our live podcast recording. I'm really proud, and well, we're going to be talking about being proud today, but I am really proud of Joe and I because we have managed to meet every month to record this podcast as we said we would at the beginning of the year. I am delayed in actually publishing the podcast though. So I'm pretty sure I have not done the one from May and possibly March. I can't remember, but hopefully I will get a chance to catch up on that. I swear the universe is out to get me. Every single time I think I'm going to have a few weeks to get caught up or accomplish things, something happens. So, but even with all of that, we have made it happen. We're here each month and we're recording an episode. So that's at least happening. Yay.
And that's amazing. Check that off. We're recording the podcast.
Woo.
That's so much better than what we were doing last year.
It is true. Speaking of, we still do have 2 podcast episodes we recorded in the previous year that I have not gotten posted that someday will get posted. Thankfully, it's information that doesn't, at least in the next few years, it doesn't go out of date. It's all relevant and helpful information for people. It's just me getting my act together enough to actually put it out there. Okay, so Joe, how are you doing while I pull up our feed so I can see what's going on here?
Well, it's definitely been a little bit of time and completely different. So I have started a new job working with a different population. I'm now working with adults, and it has been such a shift for me. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot. It's kind of reignited my passion for it, because I'm now also relearn everything I have learned, I'm continuing to learn new things, which I haven't done in a little while, and I love it. I mean, yes, I learned PFA, SBT, but it's different when you work with adults and learning a different way, a different billing system, different expectations on how to provide therapeutic behavior consultation services in Virginia. It's completely different, which I love. I love learning. I love doing different things. So it's been really fun. And it has also, been great for home life too, to be here with my kids a lot more. So it's been a lot of fun.
I love it. And Hannah, how have you been?
I am doing well. In a similar learning new things about the insurance side to help people better get connected. I also recently switched over on the ABA side from children to adults, and I can completely agree, Joe. It's like fascinating the level of we're taking things and applying it like now. We're not just talking about applying it in 5 or 10 years, and it really makes that importance and that need so real. Like it brings your skills to the next level, at least for me. And it's exciting. Like, let's practice going to the grocery store right now. We're doing these activities. We have the need for this independence right now, and it just makes the science so alive and real. But similarly, in a state of wanting to constantly learn new things in new areas, and that's bringing me to new areas and new fields. So it's an exciting time.
That's awesome, Hannah. Yeah, and it's also really interesting with the how much are needed, because now it's also there's different risk involved with it. This individual doesn't get help. We're not looking at not developing these skills like within a month. We're looking at if they don't learn these skills, they could end up in jail, or it's completely different. And it's fascinating. So
maybe, well, I mean, I guess we could change the topic, but we should put that down as a topic. I know we have quite a few folks who are in the collective that work with adults. So I can put that down as a future podcast and or meeting with Dr. Megan topic, because I think it would be what I think is not, it seems to be getting discussed a bit more, but it definitely wasn't when I was in school. This idea that in other fields, people work rotations and they work with different populations. So depending, they ultimately might specialize in something, but they've at least had experience with different things. And I really think people, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, but that people who are going to be working in early intervention or any of the child teen spaces should have at least some exposure to the adult services field as well, so that they can make sure they're not creating learning histories that would interfere with being an independent and successful adult. And I don't think there's enough discussion around that, especially in early intervention. It's very focused on the right then and now, which obviously is necessary. But if we're not thinking about, well, if we teach this like this now, what effect will that have in the future when they're an adult?
Absolutely. I love today's topic. I just watched the video and I'm excited to talk about that. But absolutely, you took the words out of my mouth. It's an essential piece because you don't know where you're going, where you need to get to, and how to prepare to get there until you've had experience with the adult population. Because otherwise, how can you how can you correctly have your eye on that future goal, the ultimate future goal, and prepare everyone in that individual's life for that? That might include educating caregivers and guardians on like, what does this look like to you? Where do you want this to be? What are you preparing for when we're 15, 20, 25? And that might be something, everybody needs to work towards within that family unit or caregiving setup. So exciting.
Yes. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in on what we chose randomly, because I saw a post of a video and I thought it was a really interesting thing to talk about. So I am putting the video in the show notes. And if you're watching us live on Facebook, I put it in there as well. There's a couple that does these different videos on Instagram where the husband is neurotypical and the wife is neurodivergent. Based on the hashtags, it looks like diagnosed has an autism and ADHD diagnosis, and they just share their different perspectives. So there's another one that I saw from them a while ago that was about how, like, when he goes to bed at night, he just goes to sleep. He just lays down and goes to sleep. And like, she's like, what? You're not thinking about all these things and like all this stuff. You're not making all these lists. And she's just very surprised that he can just literally like shut down. And I would love to know how to make that happen. I don't know. I'd be curious to see, because obviously, as much as I wish there weren't like differences, there are between, how things are experienced for someone who is assigned male versus female at birth as well. And I do wonder sometimes with how many men I know who do not complain about sleeping. So Joe, I am going to ask you this real quick. Do you just shut down? Is it more of a man thing on this one? Because I don't know any men who are like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about all these lists and blah, 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 blah.
I guess I'm atypical because like for me, like I have a hard time falling asleep. Okay. If I'm extremely tired and I powered myself down for the day pretty quickly, in the right way, like, then yes, I can fall asleep. Like last night, I fell asleep pretty quickly. However, I am more of a night owl where I will stay up and I do have a lot of things on my mind. And I'll stay up and it's really hard for me to fall asleep. But there are also times where, like 2 nights ago, I wake up because I hear thunder out in the outside, and I was like, "Ooh, a rainstorm!" And I love storms, anyways. So I stayed up a little bit longer. But then I got on my phone, and then I started thinking about my trip coming up, and maybe, oh, you know what, maybe I can do this or I can do that. And then I'll start going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Guess what? I didn't go back to bed after 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
I stayed up. And I'm like, oh no, this this isn't good. But I go down rabbit holes like that too. Like if I wake up in the middle of the night and like my mind starts turning.
Yeah.
This was even more prominent whenever I was a special ed teacher too. Like I had so much things on my mind because I was like, I'm not ready for the next day. I'm so tired. Like I can't stay up till like 2 o'clock in the morning and just work on this, this stuff for tomorrow. Or I have treatment like lesson plans due, and Sunday nights are the worst because that's like before I go back to work, and lesson plans are due Monday morning. And most of those lesson plans I can just toss out the window because they don't, like, the percentage of times I do that to plan or is like 20%. But yeah, no, there's like, I have a hard time falling asleep.
Yeah. Okay. So all right, then it's just different people sharing perspectives. I've had a small sample size, but I feel like most of the guys I know just go to sleep. So anyway, the actual topic though, in this video, they were sharing, he had mentioned something about how he'd accomplished a task, and she asked him, oh, what do you feel proud or something? And he was like, yeah, I do. When I finish things, I feel proud about it. So it's them having a conversation about what he feels, this sense of accomplishment and pride when he finishes something. And she's like, how do you do that? How did that happen? How do I get that? And she's asking and wondering, why she doesn't have that same experience. So I thought it would be interesting to have a little bit of a discussion about that, because there's so many things that come up for me. But the first one that I thought would be fun would be for those who are on, because we have a few folks from the collective, if anyone wants to share just our little sample size here, what people experience when you finish a task. Do you feel any certain way about that? Like, does something positive happen for you, or potentially negative? Because there's some people who say there's a negative experience. So I just thought it'd be interesting to hear people's own experiences first, and then we'll go from there. I have lots of other things I could bring up about it. So Joe or Hannah, do either of you want to share first, since you're both on the video here?
I can go ahead. I love this because I love making lists. I make a list every day at the beginning of the day, and probably multiple times throughout the day. And any of the other BCBAs and RBTs I've worked with know me for my, I always have a blank sheet of paper for writing down and making my list, and then one that's like partially completed. But along this topic, they even buy me like notepads. Like, here, she's gonna need paper for her list. That's the thing. But I don't find like joy in crossing them off. It's not like a thing to like go back and cross it off. Like, I'll glance at it and be like, okay, these are the things I have left. But it's always about like, okay, what do I have left to do? So, and I don't have any documented diagnosis yet or anything, but I think it's an interesting concept that like I don't need to go back and cross it off. I don't want to go back and cross it off. And I don't feel anything from like, oh yeah, I've completed all of this. And I was thinking at the end of the day, like in our field, like how dare we exclude or not give proper attention to like internal states. And I think this is a funny like assumption, like, oh yeah, you got your list done, you're gonna feel some kind of way. And I don't receive that, like checking off each line item, but maybe I'm odd.
Yeah. Okay, that is interesting. Yeah, a lot of people that make lists definitely say it's reinforcing across off. What I hear you saying is the list is more of a kind of a visual support, a way of organizing what you need. It helps you do the things you need to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like my guide. I've tried to go back recently and start crossing them off. I've been talking to my coach about that. Like, okay, maybe I need to go back and like look at it and actually cross it off. Maybe I can like try to condition some satisfaction or sense of accomplishment or joy here. Joe, do you cross off lists?
Yeah, that's another rabbit hole I go down, is productivity YouTube videos and bullet journal for videos. So like I have like in this room alone about 6 different journals. And when I first came into working with adults, like I was like, all right, I need to find out what to do with these journals, or like how to like best like keep track of my task and like all that. And not only do I use notebooks, I also use ClickUp to organize projects and color code it. And I go down such a deep rabbit hole, and sometimes like for me it's sometimes like for me, like when I write down my to-do list, and I do it on paper too. I have a specific sheet just for to-do list. When I cross off, I'm like, okay, off to the next one, because the list never ends. And that's the one problem I hear, is like your to-do list never ends, and you just get so much like daunting feeling, like, oh, like, well, I have more stuff to do. Like I do the to-do list isn't just gives me that, that feeling of like happiness or anything. It's just a matter of like keeping myself organized, so I know what I have to do and how to do it, and what things I have to do left before this due date. That's it for me. It's a way to keep my mind clear, because like for me, I do have ADHD, and I find myself, when I didn't have a to-do list, like I am so clouded, and like I couldn't focus on or I have so much in my brain that I couldn't be effective. So when I wrote everything down, all that stuff basically like was a visual list for me, so I could really focus on the importance of that hand. But like I don't get like that happiness feeling or anything. It's just, all right, that's done. That's done. Or off to the next one. Let's go.
I think we're figuring out who all is neurodivergent today. Okay, we have a few folks that aren't on like audio and video. If anyone wants to get on the microphone or type in the chat, feel free. If you have a different experience to share, or if you do feel a sense of accomplishment, I'll go ahead and share mine while we see what folks are doing. So this is what came up for me. I have a memory of feeling a sense of accomplishment when I get things done and being proud. Especially like definitely before Taylor was born, but like there was like this bit of time before COVID when I was just like insanely productive, and I was competing a lot. Like Ryan O'Donnell and I were doing a lot of work together, and it was almost like a competition of like who was gonna get more stuff done or whatever. But I was like highly motivated because it was all like the Do Better movement was getting started in 2018. And I was like finally getting all of this information out into the public sphere that I had been teaching people kind of one by one in mentorship and supervision. So it was just this whole big thing. And I just remember like, even just writing down a plan was reinforcing. Like it seemed like almost every little thing I did, I felt a sense of accomplishment and pride. And when I watched this video, I was trying to reflect on, and it's like, now I don't, but also I do. So like, but it's because it's like, it seems like there's so much noise happening, and there has been for a while, that it's like, when I can get something done, I'm like, holy cow, I finally was able to get that done. This is incredible. Like, I don't know how it happened, but I was able to get it done. And I'm just like, so happy that it's just finally like off of the plate, but it's not the sense of accomplishment I felt when it was like, when I was just had, I guess, felt like more free time or whatever to focus on things and do what I wanted to. It's more just like a sense of relief, like, oh, yes, I was able to finally do that thing. Now, let's move on to the next thing or whatever. So that's kind of where I am right now. And the video, it kind of made me, I felt like both people, I could feel both perspectives, and it made me a little sad that like, I'm not the guy right now. Like, I'm like, man, I miss those days. I wish that still happened. So, we could sit here and hypothesize all the different reasons why that doesn't happen anymore. But, anyway, so that's where I am with that. But I have so many other like thoughts and points. I'm just going to pause real quick and just see if I don't see anyone in the chat, but I'm going to just pause talking for a second to see. We have Christy, Jenny, and other Megan. Do any of you want to say anything before we move on to the other part of the discussion?
I can pop on. I had kind of been jotting down some of my thoughts after watching that video. And I don't feel the accomplishment. I don't feel the pride. I feel a momentary, like a sense of relief, just kind of like you just mentioned. But not that pride, not that, that feeling of accomplishment. It's funny that you mentioned like competition, because if there is competition present, then I do feel it, that I do feel that sense of pride and accomplishment. But if there's no competition, it's lacking for me. It's just like, okay, that's done, and on to the next. What was interesting to me is watching the video, it reminded me a lot of me and my partner, our relationship, our dynamic. He very much so feels proud of his accomplishments, and I can feel that I can feel happy for him when he is accomplishing those things, but I just don't feel that for myself.
Yeah. Interesting. Generally, you don't have to share, but if you're open to it, or if you obviously think he would be, do you know if there's a difference in terms of, I know we're just categorizing people here, it's categorizing people. Is there a difference at all that you know for neurodivergent versus neurotypical between you guys?
I would say that he has more of a neurotypical profile than I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I just like want to ask everybody. Do you feel a sense of pride? Are you categorized as neurotypical? Let's all understand this, but okay, thank you for sharing. And I love that you shared that you can see that, and notice that he is feeling proud and be happy and like have that moment together, because I think sometimes it's easy to get sucked in on like, wait, maybe, I don't know if it's jealousy or what it would be, but it's easy. I don't know why for humans, we have a tendency to go more like that, more aversive experience route, but we do. So it can be difficult, I think, if we see, and we don't have that same experience, like, wait, how come I don't have that? And why do you get to have that? Like, what's going on here?
Megan, I will say for me, when I have that sense of pride of like when I complete something, that only happens when I fix something. My wife told me I should hire someone to just fix. That's when I feel like, yes, I fixed it. And I told you I can fix it.
You can come to my house and fix things.
I think that brings up a good point, like that Megan touched on with hers too, like the type of task, like you said, you were doing a lot of setup for Do Better at that time, and like if once everything was going, and I don't remember exactly what you said, but like the task itself, I don't know, for myself and maybe others, that maybe that in itself could bring joy, where like just little line items on a to-do list that aren't accomplishing a bigger picture. But right now I have a lot of small to-dos that are building up towards a bigger item, but until I can really check off that, yes, this big item is complete, all of these little to-dos, I can't find any joy in. But fixing something like Joe said, or like finally being like, yes, Do Better movement is off the ground, we're analysts, so I can't not look at the very, very tiny things, and like maybe there's multiple aspects of it, like different items might elicit different feelings potentially.
Well, Hannah, that actually brings us to the next part that I was going to bring up. So I'm curious, I know, especially generally, I'm pretty sure you've been on the conversations we've had about this, but have any of you explored anything from like the behavioral neuroscience literature on the dopamine reward system and what the research is showing when people are focused on the process versus the outcome? Any yeses or nos there? And if you shook your head,
I
was
mean,
looking
I
at the
heard,
Facebook feed, so I didn't see it.
yeah, no, I heard some, like, have heard somewhat of like, this dopamine factor, and I haven't like dived into the research either.
Okay. So we're going to talk about this. There's a few things that are kind of pulling together. Jenny said yes in the chat. Hannah, have you seen anything about this?
No, I have not.
Okay. So I listened to a podcast probably almost a year ago at this point where they were talking about it. Was the discussion was around the difference between if we're focusing on being productive, or I'm not being productive, the process, and just, what is coming up for us and like noticing as we do the process, which Hannah, even what you were describing, like even these little checking off the boxes would be considered the process, versus the final outcome, like getting the full big check done, like say, oh, I got that. Whether it's in the video, she talks about like, I got 2 college degrees. And then I was like, what's next? So it could be something as big as getting a degree, or it could be like writing a book or a project at work, or even a treatment plan, like whatever the outcome, the product is that you're producing. What they found in the neuroscientific research is that people are happier and healthier all around if they're focusing more on the process than the outcome. And what's interesting is in our society, I would say, I don't have an actual percentage, but I feel like it's very close to 100% of what people focus on is the outcome. So that like goes against, the whole, I guess. So there was a comment on the Instagram chat that talked about like capitalism, and where it's like, I don't want to get super political or anything, but it's just a lot to, how it interweaves and to think about. A capitalistic society is focused on production, outcome. What are we producing? What are we accomplishing in that way? What physical, tangible thing can we give to people, and all of that kind of stuff. And the person on the comment was like saying how there are people, and I've had this discussion recently as well, probably more times than that, but definitely like, even when I say recently, I mean Sunday, about how we don't exist in our natural state, that there are systems that have power over how humans are engaging in their day-to-day life, and even as a white woman, I am way less negatively affected, obviously, by those systems than people of color or other marginalized groups would be. But even I can notice that, wow, I wonder what life would be like if we weren't like all just falling in line with these folks that are in power up here. Now, you don't all have to agree with me on that or anything, but that the comment was just interesting because it was talking about like what would be neurotypical versus neurodivergent, normal versus abnormal, however people want to categorize it, if humans just naturally existed. And there's a whole separate discussion that I got into on Sunday around like, well, naturally it might still end up this way, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about where we are right now. So right now we live in a society that definitely prioritizes outcomes. And I think, and Hannah, I mean, Joe, you could relate to this. I'm sure everyone can relate to it, but Hannah and I have talked about this recently, especially in our field with all of the outcomes that, especially BCBAs are tasked with like treatment plans and reports and data and all the things. So our lives are constantly bombarded with these outcomes, and like the dopamine reward system is tied to that, like those outcomes versus the process. What does that mean for like burnout and well-being and health and all of that kind of stuff? for ourselves, but then of course we also do it with our clients. What do we provide reinforcement for? Do we provide reinforcement for a correct response or engaging in the process of some sort of activity? Nine times out of 10, I would say it's a correct or some target response, right? Like it's in our treatment plans. This is the target response. This is the thing that will contact reinforcement. The outcome is what contacts reinforcement most of the time, not the, happy, relaxed, and engaged, safety. We're all saying we want to focus, not all, but a lot of people are saying they want to focus on that more now, like being more observant of their clients and whether or not they're happy, relaxed, and engaged, whether or not they're feeling safe. But we're not necessarily adjusting our way of practicing to focus on this research that is showing that like the process is more important than the outcome. The video obviously brought up a lot for me. Because like these are all things like coming together that I've seen in different places. So I'm going to pause again because I could just keep talking. I'm curious what people's thoughts are.
Dare I say, and I wrote this down before you went into it, so I'm so excited we're on the same page. Dare I say that like it appears that it's evidence-based. There's evidence out there that we should focus on reinforcing the process over reinforcing the product. And I love that you brought that into what's being modeled for us as well, because if we're constantly in this system where only reinforcing the product is modeled for staff, it's very hard to then go do something different, and so modeling that on all fronts, but that's a big shift. And I've seen some of it in the parenting world now that I have a almost 2-year-old, and they're talking about, but they're not talking about on such a philosophical level. They're talking more about, like reinforce the effort, or they're using different wording, like praising the effort, and not just the result. So it's out there, but our field needs to, like, in my opinion, look at, hey, there's evidence. We're evidence-based, right? There's evidence of this, and are we operating in an evidence-based manner in how we reinforce?
Yes.
Joe, what do you think? I kind of like just dropped a large opinion, I feel like, on that.
I mean, yeah, it's a completely different mind shift. I think my background just set me up more to focus more on the process. Just because I always focused on the client or the student, just making those many steps for progress with just like, oh, you handle that situation really well and didn't get upset. That's great. But the outcomes, like, oh, is a client making, or the client is making so much, did the client make their goals, like, or have you completed this many of, did you complete this treatment plan on time? Like it I don't know, it's a lot. And I feel like it's leading the field, like to increase like burnout and stuff too.
Yeah.
That's I felt it. Like it just definitely, I felt like after a while it just becomes a grind. So yeah, just a lot to think about. Maybe someone, does anyone else have any ideas?
One of the comments on the Facebook feed, Amelia, who was the one who originally shared this video, so thank you, Amelia, commented and said it's fascinating to see the differences in how, it's enlightening to compare and contrast and understand how these organic reinforcers are creating a different environment for us. And this was when we were talking about the difference between the husband and wife, and how like the husband feels pride when he accomplishes something and the wife doesn't, so it just, and that of course would start a whole different topic, but that is something also we need to be understanding, right? Like I think in our training are often taught this very simplistic view of you just observe. It's just as simple as adjusting the antecedents and the consequences and behavior will change. But everyone's having a different internal experience. So it's not that simple. And this, like these videos, the more and more people share, yes, it's verbal behavior. Yes, it's people, thinking and talking out loud about their experiences and what's real for them and what's not. And there are definitely behaviorists that would say, that's what they think. And that's their verbal feedback, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. We just need to observe what happens. But my guess would be, especially for this video that we're talking about today, if we observed the husband and wife, we would likely see differences in what they're, how they're allocating the responses. Obviously, they're having different reinforcement experiences, right? Like he's feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride when he completes things and she's not. So my guess is they have pretty different ways of completing tasks or engaging in different projects and activities than one person would, right?
Yeah, I love that. Like bring back to what I said, how dare we, ignore those internal states of like, maybe somebody feels different when they're even receiving reinforcement in the way that we're delivering it. They might might not be reinforcing to them. So what we're delivering, whether it's that check off on the list, completing all the items on your list or just the one item, or even the verbal praise, I've seen that quite a bit where that's not reinforcing because an individual's learning history, maybe they're not used to that, maybe they've never received it before. But I think just our practice, we might be assuming some things are going to be reinforcing or trying to condition them as reinforcing. But that learning history and the styles, like you said, of the couple might be so different that those pieces are essential to look at. And I kind of think of this as like, when we were talking about earlier, as far as the product-based, reinforcement versus the process-based, it's almost like getting very specific and looking at behavior-specific praise. How often we might think we're doing behavior-specific praise, we might be doing the result and praising that result instead of really reinforcing along the way the behaviors that led to that result, even if the result doesn't happen. Yeah.
Yep.
So like with my little one, instead of being like, oh, good job, you did blank, like you put on your shoe, good job, your shoe's on, like, oh, you're trying, great trying, you're working hard with the Velcro. I don't, silly examples because she's very, very small. But I'm always trying to like find something that she's working hard at and praise that working hard instead of being like, oh, you accomplished this, or you're so smart. Because instead of praising that like state or that, because we're not completing things. It's very easy when she's not completing anything. So the only thing we can praise is like the effort and the little tiny wins. But even as we're trying, we might be, we think, oh yeah, we're definitely praising the process, but are we praising the process?
Right.
Or reinforcing the process rather, because praise might not function as reinforcement.
Yes. Well, and so what I did just now is I put into ChatGPT. I'm not going to go through all of these because I think like, it's something that would be better with like slides, but I'll say one of them. And then maybe this might be, I don't know, because I am so delayed in putting these podcast episodes out when people will actually hear this episode that aren't listening live right now. But one of the things that we're rolling out for Do Better, I was hoping in July, but it's looking like it's going to be more like August at this point, since it is June 25th. But we're starting this thing called the Trailblazer Guides, and it'll be different members, like maybe Hannah, and others who have expertise in different areas, and they'll be creating more member-led content. And so one of the things we've been talking about doing is something, more business operations, OBM, staff, all of that kind of stuff. And I really think our discussion around this it'd be really beneficial to have a full, training on this idea of how can we adjust some of our procedure, the way that we are training staff, and engaging in OBM type activities with staff that are focused more on the process than the outcome. So I asked, because I can't, I'm not fluent enough with this yet. I can't just come up with examples off the top of my head. So I asked ChatGPT, so I will let you know that these came from ChatGPT, to give me an example of process focus versus outcome focus for a behavior analyst. And I just love what it came up with. So the one example, it says developing client programs. If we have a process focus, we would enjoy the creativity and problem solving and designing individualized intervention plans, celebrate small successes and improvements in client skills. An outcome focus would measure success solely by whether the client meets the ultimate behavioral goals, and feeling accomplished only when the intervention plan achieves the desired outcomes in a specific time frame. Just based off of that one example, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and also reflect on, as someone who would be working, which would be more motivating and less stressful and burnout related. That process piece where we're the focus is on problem solving, being creative, coming up with ideas for the client, versus the outcome focus, which is just, did we achieve our goals or not?
Absolutely, the process. Absolutely. I always consider myself I always told my RBTs, so it's I care about you becoming the artist. This is your session. I want you to kind of design how you want to run session and be creative and think on your feet, because that's where the real gold nuggets come from, I feel. And for me, that's so reinforcing for me. And then also just even the client, I see in session, them making little leaps with acquiring different skills, and just seeing them light up, and just that for me is the bread and butter right there.
Yep. How often do you think graduate training and supervision programs focus on reinforcing reinforcing that process piece of being creative and problem solving and coming up with unique ideas for your clients, versus what were the goals? Did they meet them or not? I know you, Joe, just gave an example of how you're doing that well with your RBTs, but as a field as a whole, what do we think the priority seems to be?
Oh, the priority is making sure that you have a detailed process of how you set up your trials, and how you're supposed to complete the targets in your session on Central Reach, and you need to follow that process.
All the outcomes, right? It's these outcome-based things that are, and even when companies have ongoing trainings, unfortunately, part of it is logistical. Folks need to know how to use Central Reach, and they need to be able to meet the insurance requirements and make sure everything's in compliance, right? So all the time goes to that stuff. And all of this process, which would benefit not only the behavior analyst, but obviously the clients too. All of that focus either isn't even on anyone's radar, or is just not, there's no time for it.
Yeah, where do you find the time to do all the things that you need to do, and what's priority? And I feel that's why the Do Better movement started, is part of that. How do you do all these things better? How do you become a better analyst?
Yep.
And part of that is where do you put your focus at? Because most BSBAs don't even have the say in what they want to focus on. They have to follow guidelines and what the company or the insurance companies want you to focus on, and how they want it done. And yeah, that's the problem, or part of it anyways.
Yep.
I completely agree, Joe. And I love how you described it as that, like, you're inspiring others to get creative. And I think we have to look at, like, what are we creating and what are we inspiring? Are we inspiring others? And are we creating an environment for this individual, whether a child or an adult, that is fun and encouraging? And maybe for a child, playful, maybe for adult, reinforcing, and leads to them to be able to access more reinforcement, and them to have a least restrictive, environment, whatever that looks like at the time. But we ourselves are a human in this picture, right? And I think exactly what you guys are just talking about made me think of, is that being creative and that inspiration of joy, of reinforcement, is that being reinforced in us? Just sorry, take it really deep, but Megan was talking about all these other priorities that all these company has, and we're being reinforced, or we're being given things like pizza parties or small bonuses that they're hoping will work as reinforcement. On these, like, tangible quantitative metrics, but are we quantifying these things that you and I are talking about that are really important for each human, and to create that environment where we're naturally celebrating the process, or we're allowing that creativity and that fun, so that's an environment that our client wants to walk into with us when we're there in it, whether we're walking into their home or their group home, or they're walking into school and we're there, or they're walking into a center. Like, are they like, this is amazing, I'm here with Joe, and like, this is going to be a great day? But is that being reinforced in us? Because what is that? I'm not good with technical terms or phrases, but what is that term? Like, any behavior that's not being reinforced is eventually going to go away. So if that behavior is being ignored, maybe at times punished, and it's not being seen and recognized and reinforced by the supervisor, company, big picture, I think it's we can try to do those things, but that bigger picture has to be seen, that, like, this is important. And it sounds like you're doing an excellent job of it, Joe. I just think, like, we need that exactly how you described it. I'm not doing it justice.
You're doing great. It's always fun to just talk off the cuff and explain things. That's why, like, for our podcast, at least, it's more of a conversation. We don't care if everyone's using the terms. We need to be able to talk as everyday people. You're not in a scientific research study right now. It's fine. We have about 5 minutes left. I mostly got through all of the random thoughts that came up for me. Does anyone, I know we still have a couple folks on that are just listening in. Does anyone have thoughts they want to share about this topic or anything else before we close out for today? Or want to add to this idea around focusing on the process versus the outcomes?
I feel like this could be a conversation that I could, like, easily have and talk about for hours with a bunch of us, just like one night, and just like go around a circle and just continue to talk about, because once you start, it's like you just keep on going down this, like, philosophical hole of ideas and philosophies. And yeah, I feel like there's so much to unpack, and you can continue to talk about. I guess, like, my thing is, like, so after this discussion, what is, like, one action that we can do differently, or what's one thing that we can do differently from realizing what's in ourselves, like what's happening and how can we go and do something different. Hopefully do it in a better way.
I love that question. Jenny said, as an instructor in higher education, she tries to highlight the process for her learners. I was thinking about something similar when I was mentioning, with Do Better, I'm picturing maybe some sort of workshop experience where we go through in more detail a little bit of the research, obviously, so everyone can be on the same page around why, as behaviorists, this is more, should be evidence-based and something we're focusing on. And then doing almost exactly like what you were talking about, Joe, where going around, each person's going around, but we're thinking of our current strategies, right? Okay, so right now when I do a performance evaluation on a staff member, we're looking at these things. How could I change it from outcomes to process? And we work together to help like revamp some of that stuff. Or like with my clients, how could I, focus more on the process? And we'll have a framework and a structure that we can use to guide that, but it'll be a live opportunity for people to sit and kind of start restructuring things, because we all say, oh, we want to do it. And then, as we mentioned, the time's never there to do it. So if we make it like a group effort, I think that could be really beneficial. Jenny says she loves that idea. Christy wants to talk. I'm going to see if that works. Christy, I pressed ask to unmute. Is it letting you? It doesn't let me unmute you. I can only ask to unmute you for some reason.
It came off for a second there and then went back on.
I know, I saw that too.
Try one more time. Yeah, it keeps like, I ask and then it like looks like it's going to do something and then it doesn't. So, Christy, I wish we could hear your thoughts, but I definitely want to, if you want to type anything, or we can hopefully catch it on a future interaction.
I want to say thank you, Joe, for bringing it to like, what can we do differently to start bringing this to the forefront? Because I think quite often I take a training, I'm in like an hours-long CEU, and I'm like, that sounds amazing, but I never operationally define or have any metric towards applying it to my practice. So it's just this amazing thing that somebody talked about once that inspired me for a day. But I'm going to add it to my own, some of my own many lists, my own checklist, but then also the data for follow-up for those I supervise, because it's not on my data list currently as we're going over things. So checking in with that and reinforcing that, because it's not something that's talked about. And even though I know it's important, I don't have it on my supervision agenda. So adding that.
That's awesome, Hannah. Yeah, I mean, like that brings up a great point. It's like I go to these conferences, spend all this money, go through, get my CEUs, but then like it's a great conversation, but then like I'm left like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I mean, like what am I going to take home to actually apply what I learned? And I think like for me, like that's why I seek out and want to learn so much, is to learn and then try to find a way to apply it and make my life better. That's why I do bullet journaling and try that process, and just to make just to be a better human and be more productive. So like today, like for me, probably what I'll end up taking from this conversation is probably focusing on more just now with its new role, like more the process of like, just focusing on the process of giving like focus on a process of just how I complete my work that's more effective for each client that I would come in contact with. I don't know. I'm thinking off the top of my head, like it's hard because like it's like you almost need time in your day for like every day to just sit down and think about and reflect on what you're doing and find something that you can change. Or hey, today I tell you what, like I need to change how I'm supervising differently because this isn't working for me. I got so many things that I still need to do. Like something's not working, something's not being effective. So what can I change to get better at supervising, or what do I need to do differently to be more present for my client during this time. So that's what I kind of focus on, is just that what can make myself, but what can I take away to make myself 10% better the next day.
And you're focusing on the process, like what's effective here, what's not effective, what do I need to change in this process, instead, because some people like, and that's the other part, I know we finished because it's been an hour, but some people, we have this piece where we've been talking about how if you're only focused on the outcomes, it can cause like burnout and stuff too, but it can also lead to a lot of ineffectiveness. I know so many companies that measure performance based on, did the client get a certain number of trials? Was there a certain number of amount of data collected on goals, or are there a certain number of goals in place? And again, it's all this outcome stuff, right? Or like with their supervisees, oh, we talked about these different things from the task list. We met this many times. Again, all outcome based, but the process part is missing. And that's where we can tell if something's effective or not. And while, yep, we're checking off all these boxes of things that have been accomplished, but when we actually look at the behavior change and the benefit to the person, it's not there. By all other measures on outcomes, they're exceeding, excellent, amazing, but that's not what we need to be looking at.
No. And I hate those evaluations when they're like, oh, you're excellent, or you're satisfactory. Is like, okay, or like you're awful. It's like, okay, but have you seen like how much I've grown this year with making this this change in this process, and how I'm doing better with making progress. I mean, like just becoming a better overall teacher. Yeah, I hate evaluations like that. that was always a dread for me at the end of each year.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
All right. Well, we're at the limit, so we'll go ahead and close out for today. If you're listening to this, I don't know when it's going to get published, so I don't even know what to say. Check our website, collective.dobettermovement.us, to see what events we have going on. And thank you so much to everyone from the collective that joined us today. And of course, Joe, for always being my insightful co-host. Do you want to close us out, Joe?
Yes. Go forth, do better, and focus on the process.
Yes. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.